Hello everyone, it's so good to see you. So today I wanted to share a little bit of a secret with you all. I am a fan of a series known as Fire Emblem. And if there's anything that fans of Fire Emblem will tell you in the last few years is that a remake of Genealogy of the Holy War is definitely coming. With every single Nintendo Direct, there are many of us who are waiting very patiently for some kind of news. Is it going to be on Switch 1? Are they going to move it to Switch 2? There are a lot of us who are slowly losing faith, and others, like myself, who, against our better judgment, continue to don the face paint and clown nose every single time. But for those who are like me, this is maximum coping hours. I've compiled a small list of reasons and hints as to why this game has to be happening if it hasn't already been completed. Some of this is speculation, others might in fact be grasping, but I think there are legitimate hints and pieces of information that could be leading to the idea that a remake is in fact coming. And it makes the most sense to go back to this game in particular. We've had a lot of new entries and spin-offs since the last remake, Shadows of Valentia. The first 3 Fire Emblem games have already been remade, but not this one or the other in its duology, Thracia 776. I'll probably be referring to these 2 games as the JoJo games because that's the world that these games take place in, and it's kind of a mouthful to say Genealogy of the Holy War and Thracia 776. It's kind of like how the fans refer to Ike's games as the Tellius games, both Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, because it takes place in the world of Tellius. It just saves the mouthful. Genealogy of the Holy War specifically has been re-released about 5 times now. It was on the Wii Virtual Console, the Wii U Shop, the 3DS eShop for the new Nintendo 3DS. It was on the Super Famicom Mini, and you can play it right now if you have a Japanese account on Nintendo Switch Online. This game is a fan favorite and is very beloved in Japan, and yet it has never had an official English translation, and that's left it as something of an oddity at this point. Yeah, I guess I'm going to start off with the most brazen claim of this entire conversation. I think this game has already been done. So like most game devs, they have everything all planned out years in advance. So they have a structure, they have a set schedule, and unfortunately in 2020, we had something to completely flip that on its head. COVID happened, and a lot of people weren't ready for that. They weren't ready to work from home, to not come into the office, and that affected a lot of the schedules of games. We're still feeling the effects of that even now, and I think that trailed on to Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. In case you weren't aware, Fire Emblem Engage features protagonists from throughout the entire history of the series. And interestingly, one of the first characters that you meet in this game, besides Marth, because of course he's going to be the first character that you meet, is Sigurd. Sigurd is the main character for one of the main campaigns in Genealogy of the Holy War, and is featured as an emblem front and center in Engage. Marth, of course, was going to be one of the first legacy characters that you were going to meet. He's the poster boy of the series. There wasn't going to be any reason why he wasn't going to be the first one. But it's so interesting that Sigurd was the second character that you meet. He never appeared in anything in an English-speaking audience, and has only ever appeared as a protagonist of a game released solely in Japan. So why would that be, you ask? My theory is that Genealogy was supposed to come out before Fire Emblem Engage, and introduce people to Sigurd and the characters of Genealogy. And so when you jump into Engage, one of the first characters that you meet, oh look, it's Sigurd, he's back, I know this guy, that came from a game that I just played beforehand. It would also be very remiss of me to not bring up the mythical Iron 18. Fire Emblem has internal codenames to differentiate themselves from one another. Now, this series was given the codename of Iron because of how the elemental symbol for iron is Fe. I believe we've been using Iron since Awakening, known as Iron 14. Fates is Iron 15, Echoes Iron 16, Three Houses is 17, and Engage is 19, as discovered from internal files from within the game. But you might be wondering, oh, isn't Fire Emblem 3 Hopes Iron 18 instead? Spin-offs don't actually count in this format. The codename for Fire Emblem Heroes, for example, is Brave, Tokyo Mirage Sessions is Stainless, and 3 Hopes is known as Seasons. The cutting room floor also states that there is a reference to Iron 18 from within Engage's code, possibly referring to a separate mainline Fire Emblem title that is still in development. It makes sense if this were to be Genealogy of the Holy War, as there is no other way to really convincingly link a game between both Fire Emblem Three Houses and Engage. It's very likely that this all goes back to how Three Houses was delayed, which then delayed Engage's potentially original intent to be a 30th anniversary title, and then subsequently also pushed back Genealogy. There's documentation that shows Engage was produced as far back as 2021. Previous leaks claimed that Fire Emblem Engage was being developed by Gust, but that turned out to be false. Perhaps that leak was inferring that it was this remake, which is still in limbo, that has them working as the developers instead. It could be that the Genealogy remake was in development at the time of Engage being made, or near completion in 2021. The original theory was that Engage fired out 4 whole waves of DLC, including an entire new story scenario, within mere months of the game coming out because they wanted to hurry and announce a new Fire Emblem game soon after. But it's been over 2 years now and we've got nothing to show for it. I think Intelligent Systems, to its original plan, wanted to have Fire Emblem Engage release after the fact, so that people already knew every single one of these characters going into it, worldwide. It's not a huge loss because it's still only 2 characters between Sigurd and Leif who both make their appearances in Genealogy of the Holy War, but unfortunately, it didn't work out that way because of COVID. I guess somewhere in their plans they decided, oh, let's just release this game later down the line because we want to make the main focus be Engage and at least release it somewhat to its intended schedule. We've had releases on Nintendo Switch Online for Fire Emblem games, the most recent being Sacred Stones, so I guess they're trying to space these out as much as they can for people that never played these titles beforehand. Sigurd is a very good boy, he's always had a strong following in Japan, and there's been references of him in little bits and pieces of media since then. Super Smash Bros., funny enough, is actually one of the most important points to make about this. Ike has always had a separate costume that is colorized white and blue, very much like Sigurd's outfits, ever since Brawl, I think. Going back as far as Melee, I think if it wasn't for the fact that Roy was about to have his own game, The Binding Blade, released very soon after Melee, they would have just had Sigurd instead. But this wasn't the first time that they ever used a Fire Emblem character as an advertisement for a game that was about to come out, because this also happened in Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. Corrin was released before Fire Emblem Fates, and at that point, at least for Japan, it wasn't unfamiliar for them to have a character be released before we could actually play their game. I imagine that Sakurai also considered the fact that Sigurd is usually seen on horseback. He's not often seen off of his steed, so maybe that played a factor as well. It's interesting to think about what could have happened to the timeline of Fire Emblem release games, considering Roy was just going to get his game advertised in Smash Bros. Melee. But then again, I mean, we still don't have The Binding Blade released in English, so who knows? Sorry, Roy. But you want to know something that we do know about Genealogy of the Holy War? That's the voice cast. You might not play it or hear about it very much, but almost the entire playable cast of characters from Genealogy of the Holy War, and some of the villains too, they are fully voiced in Fire Emblem Heroes. This is just a mobile game, but I still think it's important to note that a lot of these characters, they have a voice. They're officially voiced already, and they're consistent as well. The voice actors that do the voice for Sigurd and Leif in Fire Emblem Heroes, they also do the voices in Fire Emblem Engage. It's been kind of a slow process, but the cast of these characters have made their debut overseas through Heroes. And not only that, I feel like because of Fire Emblem Heroes, which takes so many voice actors and so many artists, I think we already know who the artists would most likely be for this game. When we were first introduced to Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia, we also saw the very unique art style that was unlike anything else that we had seen in the series. All of this was done by Hidari. They use a sort of mix between a watercolor and pastel kind of art style. And I know this is complete speculation, but I think I'm onto something with this one. So many characters from both of the JoJo games have art done by a very specific artist, Rika Suzuki. She has done a lot of art for them, not just in Fire Emblem Heroes, but also in Fire Emblem Cypher. For those who don't know, Fire Emblem Cypher is the card game that was never released out here in America. It unfortunately has discontinued and we don't see these released anymore. We never got a chance to get these worldwide. But most traditionally through the Fire Emblem series, there is one specific artist that does all the designs and characters for that one specific game. So for example, Sacred Stones or Fire Emblem Awakening. And throughout the years, they've invited these artists back to do more character designs of these characters that they're more familiar with. And so I'm pretty much inclined to believe that if they're following that same tradition, the character's designer for the Genealogy and Thracia 776 games would be Rika Suzuki. She has a beautiful, almost regal looking art style. These characters are like shining, and I really hope that we can have the entire game look like this art style. It was to the point where I used this art that she does for a very specific fake box art. This box art, I've seen this make the rounds in YouTube speculation thumbnails, people making articles, just using it as an example of like, oh, this is what it could look like on Switch. I guess at this point I need to make a Switch 2 version so that it kind of lines up with the times. Do you remember when there was that so-called leaked document with a bunch of Nintendo Direct announcements for April 2024? Someone out there must have really liked my mock-up. I remember when Twitter's AI was saying that this leak for Fire Emblem was false. On my own post, it asked if I could provide context, and I was like, I am the context. But yeah, at the end of the day, we kind of have an idea of what this game will look and sound like, and that makes me very excited. Now, if you want to talk about something that's a little more grounded in my theory crafting, ironically, it comes from Nintendo Today, of all things. So very recently on Nintendo Today, we got a short video that displayed all the icons that you can use for the Switch 2. I think they added like 100 more, and also included new titles like Fire Emblem and Pokemon. And it's the Fire Emblem icons that I want to look through real quick because there's some weird inconsistencies here. So if we scroll down a bit, we reach the point where we have 3 rows of Fire Emblem characters, and we're just going to go through them real quick. So we have both of the Allirs, the avatars for Fire Emblem Engage, of course, the most recent title. 3 houses, of course, both Byleths and the 3 house leaders. That was going to obviously be here because it was on Switch. It's a very popular game. Beyond that, we're going backwards now. We have Corins from Fire Emblem Fates. And after that, we have Chrom and Lucina, but there's no Robin. They have the avatars for the last 3 games, but not the Robins. And if you're wondering why Robins aren't here, it's because they don't have official arts in Fire Emblem Awakening. They don't have actual, like, with their hood off, male and female Robins. You can go through the entirety of the Fire Emblem Awakening book. There is absolutely no trace of them in here. I mean, sure, there's some portraits of their customizable appearances, but when you go through this book, you'll be amused to know that the very first characters that you see are Chrom and Lucina. Well, Marth, sorry. And after that, it just goes on to more of the secondary characters as well. And despite the fact that the avatar is so well, like, respected now as a main character of the story, Robin was kind of erased during this. We didn't get official art of Robin until Super Smash Bros., until Fire Emblem Warriors, and at this point, male Robin is treated as like the canonical Robin avatar, and for Corrin, it's the female version that's been kind of accepted as the more canonical version. So yeah, that's kind of a weird oddity, but let's keep going through the list. Micaiah is here as well, the main character from Radiant Dawn. Ike is here. Ike was, of course, he was going to be here. This is his Path of Radiance look, not the Radiant Dawn version, but he was always going to be here as one of Fire Emblem's most popular characters ever. And then beyond that, we have Erica, but then where's Ephraim? He's the second main character of the game. They're both equally important to the story, and they've excluded him. And that's, at this point, that's when you realize that this row in particular is favoring the engaged characters. So Erica is the one that's most highlighted. Ephraim is there, but he's not really focused on at all. He's just kind of sitting there and doesn't speak. Lynn as well. There's no Hector, there's no Eliwood, but there's Lynn. Roy is here, of course. Probably partially because of Smash Brothers favoritism, but then again, Robin's not there. So why isn't Robin there, but Roy is? And then we have Celica is there, but not Alm, who is also, much like Ephraim, just as much of a main character as Celica. And then going back from there, of course, we have Marth from his look that's in New Mystery of the Emblem. And gee, can you guess which characters they forgot to add to this list? No Sigurd and no Leaf. There's no characters from the JoJo games that are here. They are obviously in Fire Emblem Engage, but they're not here. Why? I also went to the Japanese version of this. I dug it out and I found out that this is exactly the same there too. Characters that are very much beloved and released only in Japan, they don't have their icons here. There is official art of both of these characters. It does exist, unlike Robin, but they decided not to add them here. And why would that be? That'd be because they're saving it for whatever the new art is going to be like in the new Genealogy of the Holy War remake. Leaf in particular, he's the main character of Thracia, but he also does make an appearance in Genealogy, just not as big of a focal point. But both of these characters would appear and they both would have new art to put in here. Probably art by Suzuki Rika. And you want to know what else gets a chuckle out of me? In Fire Emblem Awakening, you might remember that there were a lot of legacy characters that were also featured in this game as well. So there's like Micaiah, there's Ike, there's Marth, there's Roy, and also there are some characters from the JoJo games. If you look here real closely, this Seliph is here, and I'll take a photo so you can see this very clearly. But the artist for Seliph, who is the other main character for another arc in the Genealogy of the Holy War, that artist by Rika Suzuki. Their art style has changed, of course, because it's been many years since then, but they're also, as far back as Awakening, doing art for characters from Genealogy of the Holy War. Everything is connecting. I can't believe that the most concrete evidence I have for this theory is a bunch of menu icons on the Switch 2 UI. Is it going to hold any water about a year from now? Maybe it won't, but it'd be so funny if it did. And the last point that I have here is a bit more of a personal one with my own experiences. So every year we have an event called EmblemCon. I brought it up a couple of times already beforehand. And we have a whole bunch of panelists. It's held over Discord. We have a lot of voice actors that also come by who volunteer their time to do like an hour-long interview with us. And every year, most consistently, we have Christian Lamont. And you may know him as the voice of Ignatz. He also does a lot of voice direction with games like Fire Emblem Three Houses. And he happens to be the main character's voice for Seliph right here, who also is the main box art character. Sigurd is up here too, but Seliph is also a major character that you see for one of the arcs of the game. He's also very well versed in Genealogy of the Holy War. We've only had unofficial English patch translations for these games, so that's one of the reasons why we want this remake so bad, and we kind of talked about it a little bit during our last conversation. And I asked him this because of how well versed he is in Genealogy. Given the nature of the darker themes that we see in this game, if he, in his opinion, would think that Nintendo would alter the story of Genealogy to appeal to a wider audience, or can he see them leaving the majority of the story as it is? And I asked this because the nature of Genealogy of the Holy War is, it's not lighthearted at all. You can look at a game like Engaged and say how it's very silly, the characters are off the wall, they're very goofy. It does take its story a bit more seriously in the latter half, but for the most part, people's first impressions were this game kinda is just a silly little anime game. But Genealogy is nothing like that. There are very serious topics that are handled in this game, to the point where a lot of us fans of this game, we're kind of concerned, because similar to a game like Mother 3, if that were ever to get an official translation, there are themes and certain bits and pieces about the story that would have to be altered to be a bit more appealing to a wider audience. There are absolutely very different things that would be the reasons why between Mother 3 and Genealogy, but it's just kind of like that situation. And yeah, I'm a little bit concerned because this game, if it were to be released out here as it is, it probably would have an M rating. There are a lot of themes in here that would just not be appropriate for, you know, a T-rated audience. I know there are just pixels on a screen for how limited the Super Famicom was, showing just portraits as the main bits of story pieces in between. But this is not a kind story. I obviously don't want to give away too much because I think it's better preserved and experienced in the moments. Genealogy of the Holy War explores themes such as forced brainwashed marriage in the intent to conceive children, as well as child hunts. These are just a couple of the things that you see in the game that you don't ever really see in the ways that you would in other Fire Emblem games. And given the fact that this would be an HD remake, more than likely they would be able to explore and express this in much more detail than we ever were able to with the Super Famicom game. That's why I wanted to ask Christian in his opinion, like, would this game have any difference? And of course, he can't say anything, obviously. If there is a remake, if there's not a remake, he's not allowed to say anything because he's under NDA. That's what he's supposed to do. So don't go asking him after the fact. But I thought it was very amusing that when I asked him this question, we circled around to like 5 different anime talking about, you know, the duality of morality and evil and villainous intent in different anime, in different games. We touched back on Genealogy for just a bit, but we went in circles talking about other games, just trying to get off the topic as much as possible. And maybe that's just because it was the best way to express the idea. If he does know, he's not allowed to tell me, he's not allowed to tell anybody, and so I rather would leave that as it is. But we did talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, villainy in this game, and there are people who do things maliciously that are bad guys. They're the villains, they want to take over the world. And then there are characters who are actually evil, and they do evil things to others. And you witness that kind of rare vision of evil, expressed more so than in games like, oh, I want to conquer this land, I want to become the ruler of this kingdom. It becomes more personal, it becomes more human in that game. And even thinking about it now, I can't imagine how some of these scenes are going to play out in an HD remake. Some of it, it's heartbreaking. You get really upset. It's very upsetting, some of the things that happen in this game. And I think it is most appropriate to give this that M rating. You know, some people might disagree, but we've had games like, you know, Fire Emblem Engage, Fire Emblem Three Houses, the mainline titles, whatever game is going to come out on the Switch too, because there is going to be a Fire Emblem game at some point on the Switch too. That can be your T-rated game that appeals to a wider audience, but I think they can get away with Genealogy being the first M-rated Fire Emblem title. And there's already some precedence for this. MAO The Smiling Man is the very first-party Nintendo game to receive that M rating. And it may not have reached as wide an audience as it possibly could have, but for those that have played it, they have said very positive things about it. And I think it would shake up the series a lot by leaving that M rating and telling the story the way that it was intended to. And yeah, I wanted to get that out there because I do have a lot of strong feelings about that. Censorship is scary, you know, especially when these games are made by an artist, by storytellers that want to tell a very specific kind of tale. And if they soften that to be more widely acceptable by more people, I mean, I get it, it's the business, it'll sell more copies, but I hope that they recognize that it's the art form that matters more in a case like this, especially with a game that's as well respected in Japan as this. And so, yeah. But that's all I had to say. I'm sorry to kind of end this off on a bit of a downer note with that, but this game is very important to a lot of people, and this remake, in my heart, I think it's happening. It's happening eventually. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and maybe I'm maximum coping right now looking at this list of stuff that I wrote down, but I want to believe that it's going to happen. You know, this is a title that I think could leave a very strong, lasting impression with the people that do play it. There are a lot of characters that I really love in this game, and I want other people to realize and experience that as well. So I see the picture, I see the painting in front of me. Whether Nintendo wants to pull the curtain back and show us that eventually, I don't know. I'm holding out hope, and if it does happen, you're going to see me screaming and jumping out of my chair when that reaction comes out. So there's not really anything else I can think to say except glory to Grand Vale. But that's all I had to say about this game right now. As I mentioned, I am maximum coping hours now, and I am just really waiting to see if we ever get any news about this, or if I am destined to forever wear the clown face paint and wig. But I'm curious, do you know anything about Genealogy of the Holy War? Maybe you've played it yourself in the past and are also waiting for this remake? Let me know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to GVG for more, because you know I'll make a video as soon as this game is announced, because it's definitely going to be announced, right? You can support us on Patreon, follow us on Bluesky, watch us on Twitch, and all that good stuff. But that's all for now. Take care, everybody. Till we meet again.